Pleasure to be with everybody. I wanted to, just welcome and acknowledge all the energy and positivity that I'm feeling. The Sangha is so special to me. One of my home Sanghas. And so I'm always delighted, to get to share some thoughts with you all. This community has been really important to me throughout the years. Just a little bit about myself. I come from Chicago. I, have been in the Dharma for a while, about 15 years now. But about 11 years ago, I got very serious about it. I had moved to California from, I was experiencing a lot of suffering in Chicago. I was working in a nonprofit and racial equity and workforce development, and was burning out of a nonprofit job that really, a lot of us know what that's like. A lot of my values were external, was just really falling apart. And I had to make a change. And so I came to California about 11 years ago and just had an awakening. One of the first things I did when I got here was to go to Spirit Rock, to the People of Color retreat. My heart just broke open. And all of these things that I had been like consciously and unconsciously kind of stuffing inside all came out. It was a very painful story all the time. Sorry if you're hearing it again, but it was such a significant part of how I got to the seat of the teacher that I just broke wide open. It was so prevalent and so tactical. It was so painful. And the Dharma, while I was at the retreat, I was working with Gina Sharp and Larry Yang, and they started to give me tools to manage my suffering. And I just thought, wow, this is really important and incredible. And then Larry said, you've got to go to EBMC in Oakland. That's where you live. And so I've been going ever since. And I have been a deep, devoted community member at EBMC for years. And so I'm so glad to be here with everybody. That's a little bit about myself. I hope that my style is appealing to some, and I will ask your forgiveness for those that make any mistakes. I do want to just say what I'm going to talk about tonight. This is this auspicious time of year. I have a little bit of a reaction to that. I think every day has the opportunity to set new intentions and to reflect. But I understand, as a culture, we tend to point to this type of year at the end of the calendar before moving forward. And so I want to offer kind of in three pieces. The first is looking back, thinking about our practice and the Dharma in 2020. And how it's impacted us. The second part, I'd love to talk more about the foundations of mindfulness, about the ways that mindfulness has become co-opted, and where does mindfulness sit within the Dharma, and how can that be valuable to us in these times? And then lastly, I'd love to set some intentions with folks that are willing around taking the precepts and just noticing where we're at on the precepts. That maybe maybe we've taken them before. Maybe it's a good time for a little zhuzh and refresh. But so that'll be our time together. I have 3 prompts that relate to my talk that we will offer towards the end. And then people will be in small groups and triads to really connect, because the Sangha, it's very hard to be on Zoom, but the Sangha is one of our greatest teachers. And so I invite you to stay and be in a small group and share what's comfortable from my prompts. I really think it's an important part of the teaching, so I hope you stay. All right, where do I start? My heart is so very full tonight. I was thinking about what to share, and I just wondered what people's practice is. Like, why do people practice? For those of us that show up on Thursday nights, for those of us that have a practice at home, what is the point and the intention of our practice? I'll invite you just to consider, like, what is why you practice while I continue to talk. One of the first teachings of the Dharma is the 3 jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? So that there's a truth of the Buddha, not of the Buddha who was a person, but the Buddha nature that exists within all of us, that is a deep teacher, right? That there are qualities of generosity, of forgiveness, of curiosity. There are qualities and characteristics of the Buddha that exist within all of us. And so our proximity to those characteristics is our practice. The closer we get to those characteristics, the closer we can identify with the Buddha nature within all of us, the shift, this sorting starts to happen, where we can start to not attach ourselves to expectations. I have started to notice, an opening for more contemplation and reflection, and less, more responding and not reacting. So I invite us to think about the Buddha, the Dharma, the Dharma being the teachings of the Buddha, which teachings are most relevant to you, which have been really resonant and have high energy. When you hear the teaching of the Four Noble Truths or the teaching of the second arrow, which of those have come alive for you in the last year? Is there a favorite teaching that you have? A teaching that I've been working with recently is the idea that the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows are opposite sides of the same coin. I don't know if you've had this experience, but that, opportunities in life seem to present themselves with in mind. And should you not pick up that teaching the first time, they seem to come back around. So this teaching has been relevant for me, but what does it mean that without the 10,000 joys, there can't be the sorrows and vice versa? So to what extent is my suffering in this plane, really the catalyst or the conditions that are necessary to have the joys that I have? I recently, my husband and I have been fostering a child for the last 12 months, and he's on his way home to reunify with his family. And I've been thinking a lot about the joys of practicing with Michael and teaching him how to ride a bike, and just so many moments of deep learning, profound learning for myself. Yet, at this time, while he's reunified, he's actually not here now. He's with his parents. It is a big pull on my heartstrings. I've experienced a lot of suffering. And so what part of that suffering could be possible without the joy, and vice versa? So I offer to you, what teachings have been alive for you and are resonant for you in 2020. And then lastly, the Sangha of the third jewel. So much deep learning. My experience in Sangha at EBMC has been quite a roller coaster, from the program committee to deep, loving friendships, right? Kalyana Mita, friendships on the pathway with us. The experience of being connected through folks that are also reflecting, that are also considering the Dharma, that are also on a similar path. It's just so rich and full. And lots of poignant points of suffering as well. What does it mean to have your favorite teacher make a misstep? What does it mean to experience harm in a beloved community? There are parts of Sangha that cause suffering that I understand as part of learning, but just that the Sangha also is not always pleasant. There are deep learnings that are caused through comfort as well. Sangha has been my deepest teacher. I'll leave it there. Another question I was sitting with this morning was, what is underneath our practice? What is it that is underneath our need to show up, our need to end the suffering? So many of us walk through the doorway of suffering into the Dharma. What is it that's underneath there? Can we identify the need that hasn't been met other places in our life that brings us sometimes to our knees in suffering, so that we can open that doorway into the Dharma? As I mentioned, when I burned out of that job in Chicago, it wasn't a pretty picture. I was overextended in such a way that my heart, my feelings, and my body were very disconnected. The practical aspect of it is that I was suffering through addiction, through treating myself and my family badly. And it was a deep suffering. It wasn't just, wasn't temporary. It felt very, very large. And so finding the Dharma and finding a practice that allowed me to be with the suffering instead of trying to stuff it in. I was doing a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, and it just mined itself on top of itself until it was overwhelming me. I was in a very desperate place. I moved to California because I was either going to go to jail and so in that way, the Dharma really came to me and saved my life. And so when I invite the question of like, what's underneath the reason that you practice, why do you practice? It can be such a gift to begin to go through and sort through conditions that have created the suffering that brought you to the Dharma. Another thought I had was that the suffering has been, in this plane, in this earthly plane, particularly for people of color. I think this year has been explicitly plain how systemic racism and systems of oppression to cause such harms, painful bodily violence, and also traumatic to our psyche, to our spirit. And so I know that suffering also has driven me towards the Dharma. There must be more to this life than just the practice and active capitalism, right? There must be more than just to produce in this world. There must be more than just to experience the suffering. There must be more. And the truth is that the more that there is actually is the gift of the Dharma. And I have found a lot of that by turning internally. And so if you start to investigate what's underneath the unmet needs that drive you to the Dharma, you may find a place that requires you to be introspective and curious, as I have, and know that discomfort, once identified, can be worked with. And then my last point, what does the Dharma mean? Are you a person that comes to the Dharma for the blissful moments? I've had the experience of sitting and then you hear a loud horn, or sitting and somebody disturbed you, right? And it's never the way it's supposed to be. Well, I'm on retreat, it's very quiet. When I'm on retreat, I'm eating the right foods. When I'm, doing the Dharma in the midst of life is very complicated. And so I asked the question of like, are you coming to the Dharma at EBMC because you want the bliss and the, stepping towards the very positive and calming nature? Or are you coming to the practice with the mindset of like, there is suffering that I want to engage with. I want to touch this suffering so that I can heal it. Yeah. And so the question I'll ask you in your groups from this section is really like, how did your practice show up in 2020? So just you may consider that while I move on to talk about mindfulness and the way that it's been co-opted. It's a very popular topic. It's such a trigger for me. I notice whenever I see mindfulness on a magazine or on Good Morning America, I'm always so curious about where it's coming from, because the mindfulness that people talk about is this, by my perception, is this way that you can calm yourself down and you can be aware of the present moment. You can be aware of your body so that you can be more productive, so that you don't have to feel bad. And I feel like that's such a misinterpretation. The foundations of mindfulness within the Dharma fall into 4 categories and are part of a much larger system. And so here's my interpretation of those. Mindfulness of the body, right? This, the idea that you can bring attention to and notice the different parts of your body. And when I say your body, it's really important in the practice of mindfulness within the Dharma. That is, it's not attaching to this as Patrick's body. This is Patrick's hand. This is Patrick's hair. This is Patrick's heart. The body itself has a knowledge that you can tap into and becoming aware of it through body scans, through noticing and placing your attention at different parts of the body. That there's a wisdom there that is accessible to us, that isn't just for circumventing comfort. Mindfulness of feelings is the second foundation. And feelings shouldn't be misinterpreted with emotions. The feelings that are talked about in the Dharma fall into 3 basic categories: the feeling of pleasant, feeling of unpleasant, and the feeling of neutral through your whole day, and just practice with those feelings of the Vedana. So noticing this morning I woke up, I brushed my teeth, it felt good. Mouth feeling was very, very pleasant to me. I walked through the world. I was walking behind a bus and a large cloud of diesel fumes blew in my face. It was very, very clearly like unpleasant. I walked past these trees that I walk past every day, and they didn't particularly weren't pleasant or unpleasant. They were neutral. And so the practice of combing through your day and just noticing, right, the mindfulness of those feeling is different than the noticing your emotions. Emotions are more of a collection of feelings that can pull you and sweep away, whereas just noticing without judgment your feelings is the foundation of mindfulness. The third foundation is the mindfulness of the mind, or invites in the reflection of your mind isn't just a finite object. That mindfulness is the noticing from moment to moment. Through our senses and through the conditions of our life, we experience things that are interpreted into our minds, and that following the stream of consciousness of the mind is another practice that allows us to reflect and learn. But it isn't just that we want to understand so that we can control our mind, like you might think of a computer or an app or something you can put in this to receive that, but much more whole, broader, like big brushstrokes. Mindfulness of the mind is understanding the nature of it, the nature of monkey mind, the nature of our wandering mind. That in our practice today, I invited people to bring their attention back, because the mind does what it does, which is it follows a trail of responses to sensations of the body. And that awareness, that foundation of mindfulness, can be very illuminating to our practice. And then the last foundation of mindfulness is the foundations of the Dharma. So this is the pointing towards the phenomena. And excuse me for my broad strokes again, but the idea that we are in these bodies is a phenomenon. It is so rare. That people are born into these bodies by the Buddhist thinking, that we have to just be amazed at our ability to even think about thinking, to become aware of our minds and our mindfulness is phenomenal. And so what does that practice allow us to see? Noticing ourselves, not in a mirror way, but noticing ourselves in a larger context in all of our pieces. This deep practice of mindfulness of the Dhamma. What is the phenomenal pieces of our spirit and our practice that that contemplation will never get old. I talk about that for the rest of my life and still not uncover all my feelings on it. Wonderful. So the question that I want to invite for the second section, which you'll talk about in your small groups, is, which foundation is most alive for you? If you think about mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, and mindfulness of the Dhammas, which one of those is most alive? Which one do you most like, ooh, I did that one? And then also, which one is more curious? If you could spend a few days or with your partner thinking and talking about, which of those are most curious to you, and why? That'll be the second question. I would love to share with you the precepts. So the precepts, as I've understand them, as I've learned them, as I've practiced them, are recommendations. Often people will take the precepts as we go into retreat together. There are many precepts that you take if you want to ordain. There are different levels of precepts for different levels of practice, laymen versus monks versus nuns. And so just being aware that these are rules. I was raised in a Catholic household, so it's important to say that these are not the same type of rules as the 10 Commandments. These are guidelines. These are practices that will bring you closer to the end of suffering. These are practices that are available to you always and require dedication, rigor, and focus. And through practicing them, we will find a better life. The questions are going to post as soon as we go into the small groups. Thanks for asking. So the precepts fall into 5 categories. The first is no killing. And I really do experience these on a spectrum in thinking about not to take life. Sometimes it's phrased as, because I understand of the suffering and the loss of life in this existence, I commit to not taking life. And some people interpret that to mean I don't take life from conscious beings. Some people interpret that as I will not kill things or people. But you might consider the spectrum, right? Killing a person is on a spectrum with, or killing an animal is on the spectrum with, does it apply to plants? Does it have to be killing? Like, what if the spectrum of the precept of agreeing not to take life or not to end life or not to kill, what if it slid all the way down towards wanting to do no harm, right? So that if you take the precept of agreeing not to kill, that means that you don't sniff ants, that means that you don't eat animals, that means that you don't wear leather. Like, where on the spectrum are you? And so I consider that, all of these precepts fall in a spectrum for people requires some level of personal interpretation. And I invite that. The second is not to take what is not freely given. So on one end of the spectrum, this is imagining just to rob somebody or to take that is not yours, to steal, right? I also, on that spectrum, have started to consider, I don't steal, but like, what else what if I slide down the scale? Do I take people's time, right? Do I take people's story? Is cultural appropriation a meaning, a way of thievery? Is, me telling somebody else's story? Is that stealing? Is that taking from them what's not freely offered? So just knowing that there's a scale and a spectrum and thinking about where you are on that spectrum could be very helpful in intention setting for 2021. The third is complicated. It is the being aware of the harm that is caused by sexual misconduct. I abstain from sexual misconduct. I say it's complicated because as a queer Black man, I move through the world in places where I've always been told that my sexuality is, and so it took me a long time in the practice of the Dharma to be with this particular and say, my attraction to my husband or to other men is not wrong, right? It's not misconduct. And so I had to free myself of that before I could consider it. On that spectrum again, of sexual misconduct and causing very painful harm, what are the slighter gradations that are also harmful? Right, about yourself practicing. What are the ways that I show up, in my presence that I have to be mindful of? What is the sexual energy? Although sexual energy is creative and beautiful, there are places where it is unwanted or it is not welcome or it doesn't feel safe to people. Where on the spectrum am I into my awareness of how I show up with my sexual energy? Fourth precept is abstain from lying, saying that what's not true. Understanding that in the world there are many false situations, and because of that, I commit myself to not to wise speech. Does that hold true for my? Here's the thing about me telling a direct lie on one end of the spectrum, and then it's like those white lies, or here's something I posted on Facebook that was a little bit engendering a certain type of response I was looking for. Are you creating the conditions for a response that you're looking for as opposed to just saying the flat out truth? Like, where in the spectrum are you in terms of abstaining from lying. And where could you move? Okay, you don't tell lies. Bold-faced, blatant lies is not what I do. Accidental lies, lies that hurt, that are meant to not hurt people's feelings, but don't seem that bad. Half-truths that get people to give a response that I'm looking for that doesn't cause them any harm. Where on the scale are you? And could you continue in 2021 to practice and turn the heat up just a little bit to do more? And then the last is to abstain from intoxicants. The Buddha says that the mind should always be clear. Again, on the scale of the spectrum, what is your mind? What is it to have your mind be clouded by intoxicants? Are you talking about alcohol, drugs, tobacco? Are you talking about love? Are you talking about sex? I mean, what are the ways that the intoxicated, blurry, or unclear mind show up? It's very, very plain on one end of the spectrum. Get super drunk and aware of your life. Then if you roll it back, what are the other ways and the gradations and the places that you can kind of invite towards harm reduction? So, are there places that you are not being mindful of the clouding of your mind through anger? That can also be on the same spectrum. So, yes, my third question that will be handed off. And I'm going to read a couple of things, and then we're going to go into the breakout groups. Thank you. The question that you'll be asked is, where on the spectrum are you of any of those particular precepts, and where would you like to be by 2021? So now I'm going to read just a few things related to what I've shared. This is from Khalil Gibran's Prophet. A man said, "Speak to us of self-knowledge." He answered, saying, "Your hearts know in silence the secrets of the days and the nights. Ears thirst for the sound of your heart's knowledge. You would know in the words which you have always known in thought. You would touch with your fingers the naked bodies of your dreams. And it is well you should. The hidden wellspring of your soul must need rise and run murmuring into the sea. And the treasure of your infinite depths would be revealed to your eyes. But let there be no scales to weigh your unknown treasure, and seek not the depths of your knowledge with the staff of sounding line. For self is the sea, boundless and measureless." This next reading is from The Heart of the Buddhist Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh, about the touching the Buddha within. We need places where we can go to sit, breathe quietly, and look and listen deeply. When we have difficulties at home, we need a room where we can take refuge. We also need parks and other peaceful places where we can practice walking meditation alone with others. Educators, architects, artists, litigators, businessmen, all of us have to come together to create spaces where we can practice peace, harmony, joy, and deep. The heart of the Buddha is in each of us. When we are mindful, the Buddha is there. We need to take care of the healthy seeds that are in us by watering them every day through the practice of mindful breathing, mindful walking, mindfully doing everything. We need to touch the Buddha within us. We need to enter our own heart, which means to enter the heart of the Buddha. To enter the heart of the Buddha means to be present for ourselves, our suffering, our joys, and for many others. To enter the heart of the Buddha means to touch the world of no birth, no death, the world where water and wave are one. That is that's what I got